Special counsel Jack Smith has, in effect, dared Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas and John Roberts and the rest of the Federalist Society terrorist organization to rule right now, right here, that a president can commit any crime and no one in the world can prosecute them for it. More importantly and practically, perhaps, Smith has dared them to answer the rhetorical question, if Trump is right and this concept of presidential immunity, which he has summoned out of thin air, actually exists, why did Gerald Ford pardon Richard Nixon? Why did Nixon's toady, Alexander Haig, try to get Ford to promise a pardon before Nixon would agree to resign? Why did Nixon contemplate pardoning himself before resigning? Why did, if Dementia J. Trump himself is to be believed, why was he told that he could have pardoned himself before he left office 3 years ago next month? I was given an option to pardon myself, he told NBC 3 months ago this Thursday. He said in the same interview he would still have the option to pardon himself if he regains power. Why? If there is presidential immunity, why would Trump need a pardon? Why did Nixon negotiate for a pardon? Why did Ford give Nixon a pardon? As a piece of memorabilia? And setting aside that fundamental principle of equality of all Americans before the law, there is another part to this that may be much more important than any pesky legalities. To Alito and Thomas and Roberts and Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and Muffy, Bronwyn, Coney Barrett, and their owners and operators like Leonard Leo and Harlan Crow and the Federalist Society terrorists, if there is presidential immunity, even just enough to stall the prosecution of Dementia J. Trump, what happens to Trump's entire 2024 campaign that he will put Biden in prison? What does Trump do for an act if the court now wipes out the only actionable promise he has made? What if the T for vendetta campaign has to go on without the vendetta? What is vengeance in mind, saith the fat guy, if there is no vengeance? A heavy choice for Mr. Leo and Mr. Crow and the Federalists to make. I'm sorry, for Alito and Thomas and Chief Justice Roberts to make, of course. What will it profit a man if he gains the whole completely fictitious, utterly fabricated law, but forfeits his only campaign catchphrase? Incidentally, none of that is quoted from Jack Smith's writ of cert to the Supreme Court. I don't think he mentions Leonard Leo or Nixon or anybody named Bronwyn. His argument was legal and obviously strategic. And I'm not sure if Jack Smith is cutting to the chase scene or heading him off at the pass, but he has at minimum stolen Dementia J. Trump's trump card in Trump's game of stall your way to not guilty. The risk, of course, is that the court will have the audacious dishonesty to rule that Trump did not make this up, that Nixon was not prosecutable, that Trump did not need to pardon himself, and that we do not now, nor have we ever lived in even a shadow of a representative government. Because if a president cannot be prosecuted for anything he does as president, ever, we do not live under a representative government, and the Supreme Court is beyond redemption, and that would mean we would have to go figure out a way to get rid of it. And if you think that's all an impossibility, just for the history of what I've mentioned, sure, Trump said 3 months ago he was advised by attorneys to pardon himself, and sure, Nixon was pardoned, but so what? Because remember the rest of that sentence. So what? I'm Sam Alito. Alito yesterday chimed in a solo dissent to a case about Biden administration contacts with social media firms, about them trafficking in literally fatal disinformation about COVID and election fraud, and for some reason the government wanting to protect people from something that is as deadly as cancer. Our democratic form of government is undermined, Alito wrote, who is an expert in undermining federal forms of government. Our democratic form of government is undermined, Alito wrote, like the good little political and judicial prostitute he is, if government officials prevent a candidate for high office from communicating with voters. And such efforts are especially dangerous when the officials engaging in such conduct are answerable to a rival candidate. You know, nobody has exactly sewed Trump's lips together or sealed his mouth closed with epoxy. Regardless, this little indicator suggests Alito may be shouted down by Roberts and one or two other fascists on the court who do not want to see their commutes to work inconvenienced by rioting in the streets, but he is willing to tell Trump any shit Trump wants to hear from him. Alito over here, 8 Supreme Court justices, maybe 7. Maybe Thomas won't be able to contact Harlan Crow in time to get his instructions. But 7 or 8 of them will get hung up on that whole entire history of the country and the presidency thing. But Alito, he will find some way to prove his loyalty to Trump and say, no, Gabby J. Trump is right. This thing that definitely did not exist in September exists now. Also, I decree that Trump is forever 6'3", 215 pounds, and he can fly. At least the court protected its remaining sliver of superior legitimacy, a primacy over other courts it has lately resembled, namely Judge Judy and Judge Mathis and Maury Povich's paternity court. The Supreme Court did not say it won't even listen. It granted a hearing on the writ as the business day ended yesterday. Trump has until 4 p.m. a week from tomorrow to respond. And won't he be surprised when he finds out that he can't get that deadline stayed by appealing to the Supreme Court of the United Federation of Planets based on the capital of the planet, Lovetron. Jack Smith's petition is 81 pages long, and there are no punches pulled, and he accurately frames this as a question that, quote, presents a fundamental question at the heart of our democracy, whether a former president is absolutely immune from federal prosecution for crimes committed while in office, or is constitutionally protected from federal prosecution when he has been impeached but not convicted. Plus, there's an Easter egg. Smith signed this filing. His deputy J.P. Cooney signed this filing. His deputy James Pierce signed this filing. And Michael Dreeben signed this filing. And until he did, nobody knew that Michael Dreeben was working with the special counsel's office. And all he is the former deputy solicitor of the United States under Clinton, G.W. Bush, Obama, and Trump. And in that role, all he did was supervise for 25 years all the cases the government took to the Supreme Court, and he even argued a few of them himself. 105. He argued 105 cases himself before the Supreme Court. Oh, and he was detailed to Robert Mueller's office, and his job was to keep defeating all the cases brought to try to shut that special counsel's investigation down. Dreeben did his job. So no, the Supreme Court could overturn American presidential history ranging from 1974 through literally 90 days ago, but it's going to have to do it to Dreeben's face, because evidently he is going to argue this thing before them, and they'll all say, "Hi, Dreeb!" And that's Dreeben, not Drebin. Drebin was the Leslie Nielsen character from The Naked Gun and Police Squad. All right, move on. Nothing to see here. Please disperse. Nothing to see here. Please. And don't call me Shirley. I know. Different film. Day one of the damages assessment in the Rudy Giuliani trial. He already admitted he lied about Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shay Moss. Legally, we already know what Rudy is. We're just arguing about the price. His lawyer said Giuliani should be assessed nothing because he didn't personally make any of the death threats against them. Rudy has already undercut his own case. After day one, he told reporters that he's going to testify and prove that, quote, "When I testify, you'll get the whole story and it will definitely clear what I said was true." His attorney had said it wasn't true. He had, in fact, filed that it wasn't true. His attorney also said in court that the requested verdict, $43 million against Giuliani, would be the, quote, civil equivalent of the death penalty, and, quote, it would be the end of Mr. Giuliani. Okay? Well, it will be the end of him, or something Rudy does to himself will be. Just get it over with. Enough of this penis with glasses. Update on Trump's mental trip downhill. And the question from Glenn Beck. Remember Glenn Beck? Do you think Trump's faded cognitively? The answer, quote, yeah, I do. There's no question Trump has lost a step. Multiple steps. He is confusing Joe Biden for Obama. I know he's now saying he intentionally did that. Go back and look at the clips. It wasn't intentional. Look, any of us can have a slip of the tongue, but it's happening to him repeatedly. The reference of how somebody is going to get us into World War II, confusing countries, confusing cities where he is in, and it's happening more and more, end quote. The speaker, Megyn Kelly. And I have no use for Megyn Kelly, but the premise is an ultra-right witch who looks like she just stepped out of a remake of the 1975 film classic Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, notices that Trump has lost multiple steps. That means other ultra-right-wing witches who look like they stepped out of Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS have also noticed. And remember, when voters think both Trump and Biden maybe are too old, maybe have lost steps, when they think both of them are like that, Biden sweeps that demographic group by 61% to 13. My old man can beat up your old man. Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS. Go look it up and tell me if my analogy is incorrect or unfair, because it's not. Meanwhile, as I mentioned last week, Trump's self-proclamation that he'd be a dictator, but only on his first day, he swears, is the kind of obvious nonsense that still cuts through and shocks people. Saturday night, Trump defended his remarks, denying he said he wanted to be a dictator. Quote, I didn't say that. I said I want to be a dictator for one day. Yeah, and I only want to be immortal for one day. But it's going to be a hell of a long day. The dictator remarks cut through so profoundly that even Peter Baker of the New York Times heard them. When a historian wrote an essay the other day warning that the election of Trump next year could lead to a dictatorship, Baker somehow wrote and managed to slip past Times editors, poised with their portable deflavorizing in this Ohio dinerizing machine. One of Mr. Trump's allies quickly responded by calling for the historian to be sent to prison. Then, lapsing into the official point of view of the press corps that it still probably will never happen, but how dare Trump make me work on a weekend to address the minute chance that it will happen, Peter Baker added, quote, it almost sounds like a parody. The response to concerns about dictatorship is to prosecute the author. To be fair to Baker, he eventually revealed who the ally was. The nitwitted Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, of course. The president has even tried out attacks on the dictator line at a major fundraiser in L.A., and it goes without saying he needs to do this in public every week, every day, every hour. The other day, Mr. Biden said he would be a dictator only one day. Thank God. Only one day. It is fascinating that the swaggering, boastful, if it were actual humans saying this, you would assume they were drunk or stoned, Trump aides and adherents and deputy Führers and other cultists have shot off their big bazoos about dictatorship and everything else evil they want to do so much that one of the people postulated as a key player in a Trump dictatorship co-signed a statement to the media that amounted to Ixnay on the ictatorship-day conversation. Quote, let us be very specific here. Unless a message is coming directly from Trump or an authorized member of his campaign team, no aspect of future presidential staffing or policy announcements should be deemed official. The problem is because the message is coming directly from Trump. And it came from Trump when Hannity gave him a chance to lie to everybody and say he'd never be a dictator. And he, of course, said, well, I would be on day one. By the way, that message I read was co-signed by Susie Wiles. And you may know she is the person who first pretty much got Rick Scott elected to office the first time. But maybe more importantly, Susie Wiles emerging as the possible chief of staff, chief Trump spokesperson, something like that. Susie Wiles is the daughter of Pat Summerall, proving you never know where the next Nazi is coming from. Also of interest here, American patriots are meeting with President Zelensky. Republicans, formerly an American political party, now the fifth column they always warned us about, are meeting with representatives of the Hungarian dictator Viktor Orban and members of a more dangerous group still, the Heritage Foundation. And all of them are scheming about how to do Putin's work for him. Just like in 1940, the Republican Party is appeasing dictators. And surprise, surprise, there is a way for this country to go around the Republican fascists and the heritage terrorists and the Hungarian bullies, and it would be worth about $300 billion for Ukraine. That's next. This is an all-new edition of Countdown with singing about Shohei Ohtani.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Postscripts to the news, some headlines, some updates, some snark, some predictions. Dateline Capitol Hill, when the Republican Party tried to appease Hitler in 1940, they were willing to give him France, England, and the Jews. Had Hitler not then surprised even the Republicans by declaring war on this country on December 11th, 1941, before we were planning to declare war on him, had Hitler not made that strategic mistake, the Republicans of 82 years ago might have held out for full support of total war against Japan on the proviso that there would still be no action against Europe or Germany or Hitler. That's how bad those guys were. These Republicans, they're worse. When their philosophical and political grandchildren tried to appease Putin, they were willing to give him Ukraine now, presumably Poland, and the entire structure of NATO later. The Republican response to Ukraine, backing an anti-Semite for president and successfully coupling aid to Ukraine to, quote, border security, which is simply demagoguery against brown people, that is something their ancestor Republicans only dreamed of. As President Zelensky came to Washington yesterday to try to explain to delusional Bible thumpers like Mike Johnson and gutless simpletons like Mitt Romney that the Ukrainians really are fighting the Russians there, so we don't have to fight them here, the Republicans, names still carefully concealed, were meeting with representatives of the Hungarian strongman Viktor Orban in a 2-day seminar, and the Heritage Foundation is brokering it. And once again, President Biden, if you want to save democracy, you're going to have to break a few fascists. Invoking the Insurrection Act for a few hours in order to detain and prosecute Trump and his fellow insurrectionists, that's too strong a measure for you? Yeah, I guess. What about getting this Heritage Foundation declared a terrorist group? Or at least officially designated as surreptitious agents of an enemy government, which is what the Heritagers are doing for Orban and Hungary, who are themselves whores for Putin and Russia, to say nothing of what the Heritagers have already done to our justice system, see the A block. And Mr. President, you will also have to work around these American Nazis. A columnist in the Guardian newspaper reminded us yesterday that $300 billion in Russian assets remains frozen in Western banks. We and the British and the EU and the G7 and lots of other governmental units froze that money as retribution for the latest Russian invasion of Ukraine. Well, we're halfway to the obvious solution to two problems. We've frozen the Russian assets. Finish the job. Seize the Russian assets. Liquidate the Russian assets. Liquidate that $300 billion and give the $300 billion to Ukraine. And if the Republicans don't like it, let them sue somebody while Zelensky is taking the $300 billion and paying Western governments, hint, we are a Western government, paying Western governments for all those weapons with which to destroy Russia and particularly Putin. Because if you don't do this, the Republicans who tried to appease Hitler and who are appeasing Putin, they will next appease Xi Jinping. And then you can say farewell to Taiwan, possibly underneath a mushroom cloud, or at least with the deadly finality of what the Chinese have already done to Hong Kong. Or you can wave Xi off by making Putin kiss his $300 billion assets goodbye.
This is Sports Center. Wait, check that. Not anymore. This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
In sports, Dateline Los Angeles. When is $700 million only $20 million? When you take $68 million of it every year, deferred, and you don't start getting any of the deferred money until the year 2034. That turns out to be Shohei Ohtani's commitment to the Los Angeles Dodgers, and fittingly, this gifted athlete found a way through not one but two loopholes. Because the deferral means the Dodgers will not have baseball's so-called luxury tax applied on Ohtani's full salary of $70 million a year, only on about $46 million a year. Plus, if Ohtani is not living in California in the year 2034, when that deferred dough starts rolling in, it's not going to be taxable in California. Elsewhere, yeah, or maybe. But that means that what Ohtani has done is selfless and selfish at the same time. Dateline Toronto. So what happened to the short, unhappy life of Shohei Ohtani of the Toronto Blue Jays? Last Friday, for about 3 hours, not just Toronto, but all of Canada rang with the kind of joy that might not have been felt there since World War II ended. At 4:01 Eastern Time, Friday afternoon, Fox and MLB Network reporter John Paul Morosi tweeted that Ohtani was on his way to Toronto. He caveated, at this hour, Ohtani does not have a signed agreement with any team, which made it only sound more like Ohtani had just agreed to sign with the Jays. Somehow the story then mutated. Then it had become Ohtani is going to be touching down imminently in a private jet at Pearson Airport in Toronto. The Jays, the last non-Yankee team to win back-to-back World Series since the 1975 and 1976 Reds, have done almost nothing in the 30 years since they won back-to-back World Series. In the interim, Canada had lost its other baseball team, the Montreal Expos. Canada's hockey teams haven't won the Stanley Cup since that same 1993 campaign. The Buffalo Bills were supposed to move at least part-time to Toronto, and that never happened. And here it was, Shohei Ohtani, the Blue Jays? A nation believed it had signed a free agent messiah. Then the private plane touched down in Toronto, and out stepped Robert Herjavec, who is one of those investor guys on Shark Week or Land Shark or whatever that show is called. And a nation believed it had been conned. And then at 9 p.m., Shohei Ohtani announced on his Instagram page that he had decided to sign with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and all of Canada said all at once, "That's not how you spell Toronto Blue Jays." Well, what the hell happened with Morosi's story? He stuck to it for hours, even after Ohtani's announcement, and he was extraordinarily late in apologizing, and he has largely laid low while he has been fricasseed in every market in this country and that one, and I assume in Japan. But all I could think of was, I know Morosi. He didn't make this up. He didn't mishear it. He didn't go with a dodgy source. This wasn't wishful thinking. He's an actual reporter with actual sources and actual bosses. He had to have been convinced his source or sources was or were right. And what happened was they weren't. The sources screwed this up. And I flashed back immediately and painfully to the spring of 1988. I was leaving KTLA Channel 5 in Los Angeles to succeed Jim Lampley as the sports director of KCBS Channel 2 down the block. Nice move for me. Like 4 blocks away, they gave me 7 times what I was making. May you be the focus of one such bidding war in your life. Anyway, I had already been working in Channel 2's building for 3 years. I did the afternoon radio sportscasts on the sister all-news radio station to KCBS, KNX 1070. And one day in April, I wake up and Jim Lampley, who will be switching from sportscaster to being the lead newscaster, and with whom I will be on the news 3 times every day come August, he has gone on the CBS television network and announced that Larry Brown, coach of the new National College champions at Kansas, is going to quit that job to go to UCLA to become the coach there again. He had failed at the job in the 70s. It's a huge story. It's out of the blue. And Lampley, who helped recruit me to go to Channel 2, has broken it. For us. I'm almost with Channel 2. So I go to KNX that afternoon, and there's a note for me to go see Lampley, and Lampley tells me the story about how he got the story. And he says, I can't tell anybody this, but his best friend in sports, maybe his best friend, period, was his source for the story. He tells me who that was and how impeccable the source was. And I say, yes, that is an impeccable source, all right. Congratulations, Lamps. So we then go watch the press conference from Kansas, at which Larry Brown is going to say goodbye, and he's going to UCLA, and he says, I'd just like to announce that I will be staying on as coach at Kansas. And then he slaps his hand over his mouth. I mean, like that. And then I slapped my hand over my mouth, and UCLA slapped its hand over its mouth, and Lampley may have slapped a baseball bat over his mouth, and guess what? Larry Brown did not become the new coach at UCLA. And they fricasseed Jim Lampley in L.A. and in all of college basketball and half the newspapers in America, and I never felt as bad for anybody else as I did for Lamps, because as he had told me, his impeccable source, his best friend in sports who had told him Larry Brown was going to UCLA was Larry Brown. Larry Brown had done 2 things when he went to L.A. He met with the chancellor, signed the agreement, and he told Lampley. They may have had a snack. And then he changed his mind. Now, I am not saying John Paul Morosi's source for the Ohtani story was Shohei Ohtani. I doubt it. But the second line of the tweet that caused all the trouble was, quote, a representative of Ohtani's agent, CAA, would not comment when asked about Ohtani's travel plans. It has been speculated, a lot in Toronto, that CAA used the Blue Jays, and for that matter, used John Paul Morosi, the reporter, to light a final fire under the Dodgers to get them to $700 million over 10 years. True or not, his story does not make it just to Twitter, let alone anywhere else, if it's not phrased that way. And it's not phrased that way if Morosi does not have full confidence that his source was authoritative and correct. And it ain't fair, and it doesn't happen all that often, but when your source is wrong, if you are a real reporter, your source walks away unknown, unidentified, and unscathed because you're taking the fall. I wonder what the odds are that Morosi's Blue Jays plane landing in Toronto source was Larry Brown. Oh, Nancy! I had had the scoop that you had the contract. Then I had the story, the plane, and the hours. I wish you had signed with Toronto, dear Shohei, 'cause now my career has been sent to the showers. Where are you tonight? How could you leave me here all alone? I searched the world over and I thought I found a Tawny, but you met the Dodgers and you was gone. Thank you, Nancy Faust. That was Archie Campbell from Hee Haw. Look it up. It wasn't Archie Campbell. Obviously, it was me singing, doing an homage to Archie Campbell. And you was gone. Still to come on this all-new edition of Countdown, so I'm looking for a cassette, and instead I find a different cassette. This cassette had on it the sportscast I did on my 18th birthday. Now, it's your choice. You can listen to it next in Things I Promised Not to Tell and a couple of other things from that cassette, or you can just bail out after the daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world. Worst, Vivek Ramaswamy went on a Twitter space with Count Dracula and Elon Musk and Satan and Alex Jones and another Satan, and Vivek forgot to mute his mic as he went to use the little boy's room. You can listen to the tape. I don't need to play it for you, but look, this confirms it. There is a P-tape. First of all, I think it's the most cogent statement I've ever heard him make. Secondly, are we sure that was him and not just the sound of Musk pissing away all that money he spent to buy Twitter? Runner-up, worser. All climate deniers everywhere, just in case you thought climate change would not be the end of the world. Oh no, it'll be the end of the world. The EPA is out with a new report that if 110-degree temperatures in Edmonton in December don't get you, there is 1,600,000 tons of hazardous wastes stored at facilities in the U.S. that if the sea levels rise by 5 feet or more ever, they'd all wind up underwater. Yeah, hazardous wastes underwater. At best, that would poison all the seawater, and at worst, it would, kaboom. But the winner, the worst, Congresswoman Nancy Mace. It's not really a rise and fall of Nancy Mace, because there never really was a rise, but she gone. 4 staffers have quit, 2 were fired. She's now split with her fiancé, Patrick Bryant. They are reportedly fighting over the house they own together. There were complaints from the staff that she was talking about her sex life in the office. Why, that's impossible. It's not like she's done that, talked about her sex life in public anywhere. Oh, wait! Anywhere in public other than at the Tim Scott prayer breakfast.
And when I woke up this morning at 7, I was getting picked up at 7:45. Patrick, my fiance, tried to pull me by my waist over this morning in bed, and I was like, no, baby, we don't got time for that this morning. I got to get to the prayer breakfast, and I got to be on time, and a little TMI, but he can wait. I'll see him later tonight.
And to think that Patrick Bryant guy split with a class act like her, Nancy Mace. What's the problem? She's wearing a skirt. Today's worst person in the world. The number one story on the countdown and things I promised not to tell. And here's the first thing. I am a pack rat. Now, there is one clear negative to being a pack rat, which is that eventually the pile of stuff that you have will get so big that it will fall over and crush you. One of the positives, though, is if you are looking for something from your past, the odds are about 2 to 1 that you still own it and have it somewhere. Now, the negative to that, of course, is that if you're looking for something in particular, you're likely to find the thing that was adjacent to it historically. Not the thing you wanted, but something contemporaneous and nearby. And that leads to where we are today. I was looking for a cassette tape from the 1970s and found instead a cassette tape from the 1970s that wasn't the one I was looking for. What is on this cassette tape is nothing less than about 15 or 20 different broadcasts of mine from WBBR-FM in Ithaca, New York, my college radio station while I was a student at Cornell, from the last week of January 1977 and the first week of February 1977, including the sportscast on my 18th birthday. I will explain what else I will play for you, and you can hit the stop button. I will not take it personally. Stay for the quality that is actually here, although you should be listening first for the high-pitched voice. Let's just start with this birthday broadcast first and go from there.
5:52, and before we go to tonight's sports with Keith Olbermann, I'd just like to tell everybody listening that it's Keith's birthday today, so why don't we all send him some nice presents?
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Well, Cornell's football coaching staff seems to be filling out. The Red hired Dick Portee yesterday, and today they have added Jim Shreve to the staff. Shreve served as an assistant to Ben Schwartzwalder at Syracuse University for 14 seasons, but he has spent the last 3 years as director of athletics and football coach at Canastota High School. Shreve, who is 50, will coach either the wide receivers or the defensive backs, according to head coach Bob Blackman. Shreve joins Portee, holdovers Nelson Bob Van Lanker, and Paul Paoliso, plus newcomer Jim Fraser on the Red coaching staff. Also locally, tonight the Cornell hockey team, looking to maintain its perfect Ivy League record, hosts the Tigers of Princeton. Princeton, 1-3 in the league, have a tough task in facing the Red, who yesterday were ranked the nation's 8th best team, and who come off impressive victories over Clarkson and Yale. Nationally today, a story in the Oakland Press states that L.A. Rams coach Chuck Knox will leave his job with the Rams and will take over the Detroit Lions. The story also states that the Lions will engineer a trade to bring disgruntled quarterback Ron Jaworski from Los Angeles to Detroit, and that all this will have transpired by tomorrow. The story in the press says that Knox will be able to get out of his long-term deal with Los Angeles, where he has been just coach, if he takes a job as the general manager and the coach at Detroit. NFL rules permit executives and coaches to terminate contracts with one club if they sign with another team to fill a higher position. Neither the Lions nor the Rams would comment on the story. The American League, at the forefront of baseball experimentation for many years, is apparently interested in going to a 3-division, 4-team playoff format in time for the 1978 season. The Orlando Sentinel-Star says it has informally polled AL club owners and that the sentiment is for the new system, which would be identical to the one now in use in the NFL. Yes, the day of the wild card baseball team may be upon us shortly. Chicago owner Bill Veeck, who'd vote for anything if it were new, says he feels that the league is definitely for it and that the necessary 3/4 approval, 11 out of 14 clubs, will be obtained at a league meeting this spring. Speaking of the White Sox, Veeck's club put a former top American League pitcher on waivers today. The Chicago team has had it with 31-year-old Johnny Blue Moon Odom, who had a long and erratic career with the Kansas City and Oakland A's. Odom, 31, was picked up by Chicago last season after being released by the Atlanta Braves. Odom was involved in what was probably baseball's weirdest no-hitter last July 28th when he and White Sox reliever Francisco Barrios no-hit Oakland 2-1, despite combining for 11 walks, 8 of them coming during Odom's 5-inning stint. Still to come in sports, the World Team Tennis Association is after Bjorn Borg, and Gail Goodrich is out for the season. The details on those stories in a few moments, but now it's time to go to New York for Howard Cosell, speaking of sports.
Hello again, everyone. This is Howard Cosell, speaking of sport. This is Howard Cosell reporting.
You can hear Howard Cosell, speaking of sports, twice daily on WBBR at 8:25 in the morning and at 5:55 in the evening right here on World Report Sports. The Cleveland Nets of the World Team Tennis Association have offered Swedish star Bjorn Borg $1.5 million to play for the club for 1 season. The offer includes a playing contract for Borg's 19-year-old sweetheart, Marinina Siminescu. Seems like Borg should jump at the chance for such a huge paycheck, right? Wrong. The contract also stipulates that Borg must play exclusively for the Nets and give up his highly profitable membership in the World Championship Tennis Circuit. In basketball, New Orleans Jazz guard Gail Goodrich has had it for 1976-77. Goodrich will undergo surgery on his right Achilles tendon, which is apparently threatening to rupture. The injury, which has hobbled Goodrich all season, will be operated on in Los Angeles tomorrow by Dr. Frank Jobe, who is possibly the most famous surgeon in sports. That's tonight's Early Sports. I'm Keith Olbermann. Jonathan Halpern will be back with more sports tonight on Late Edition at 11. And Peter, thank you very, very much for the birthday wishes.
Sure, Keith, anytime. And I hope everybody in the community sends Keith lots of money and he can split it with me. Ithaca area weather. Tonight, again, a chance of flurries, the low about 0. Tomorrow, more snow likely, the high near 10 degrees. The chance of snow is 40% tonight and 70% tomorrow. Right now, it's 15 degrees. That's minus 9 degrees Celsius under partly cloudy skies in Ithaca. And that's World Report for this Thursday, January 27th, 1977. I'm Peter Shacknow. We're 93 WVBR FM in Ithaca. It's 6 o'clock.
Whatever happened to that old guy who was doing the news? Well, that is somebody I've referred to many times before and who, I don't know whatever happened to him. His name was Peter Shacknow. Oh, yes, I do know what happened to him. He went on to work for most of the news organizations in the country, still works for CNBC in semi-retirement, and has now been one of my closest friends for 48 years. In any event, so a couple of other broadcasts here, including me doing the morning news. Again, now this would be before my actual 18th birthday, doing the morning news in, the 351st largest market in the country at the age of 17. Most of the problems you hear with this broadcast are not that I didn't know what I was talking about, but that it was 6 a.m. and I'd probably had about 90 minutes of sleep, if that much. Also, a weekend-long sportscast of about 10 minutes, which includes predictions for the sports year 1977, some of which are not only completely correct, but appeared early. Many of the things that happened in 1978, 1979, even later than that, I forecasted on the air in 1977. This startled me. I don't remember the last time I listened to this broadcast. And then there's just a couple of wisecracks in here that you might enjoy too. And again, if you've heard enough of this, the stop button is your friend.
Good morning. It's 23 degrees, minus 6 Celsius, and with a light snow flowing in Ithaca, or landing in Ithaca, or whatever. I'm Keith Olbermann, WVBR News. Vice President Mondale meets with President Carter this morning to give a detailed report on his six-nation diplomatic tour. Carter greeted Mondale when he returned to Washington yesterday, but they did not discuss details after Mondale's grueling 15-hour flight from Tokyo. President Carter is expected to stress domestic issues like the energy shortage and his economic recovery plan when he delivers his first fireside chat to a national broadcast audience tonight at 10 o'clock. ABC's Vic Ratner has more.
The 4 senators and 8 congressmen met in a small Capitol room working late in front of a roaring fire, finally agreeing to give up the House's insistence on a fixed price ceiling on emergency natural gas purchases. Instead, they gave the president the power to throw out any gas sale at unreasonably high prices. By suspending some parliamentary rules, the Congress hopes for final passage of the bill before President Carter's nationwide broadcast address. Sponsors caution that this bill won't produce any additional gas, only spread the existing shortage around. But they do hope to prove that Congress can act quickly in a crisis. Vic Ratner, ABC News at the Capitol.
The Morse Chain Company's announcement of the indefinite layoff of 250 workers has already hurt the county's employment outlook. There is one bit of good news in regards to the Morse workers. The state unemployment agency has waived the usual one-week wait between the time of layoff and the start of benefits. This means Morse workers who will be laid off next week due to the energy crisis will be able to receive benefits immediately. Brighter news for Ithaca Gun Company did soften the impact of Morse's layoffs. 130 temporary laid-off workers will be returning shortly, and that's good because any long layoff could have severely hurt county industry, according to County Industrial Agency Chairman Harris Dates. Newly named UN Ambassador Andrew Young is off on a visit to Africa and talks with the leaders of Tanzania and Nigeria. However, first Young will stop off in London for a meeting with British officials on the deadlocked Geneva talks to bring about black majority rule to Rhodesia. Contrary to widespread rumors, Ithaca College is not planning to shut down due to the energy crisis. Spokesperson Marjorie Spakar says that although the college has made a concerted effort to save fuel, no alteration of the academic calendar or unscheduled vacation is planned. Rumors had IC shutting down for a week to conserve natural gas, but they apparently are false. IC's conservation efforts have, in any event, won praise from New York State Electric and Gas. A federal judge in Chicago has ruled that Marine Corps reservists do not have to get short military haircuts. He says they can just wear short hair wigs during their once-a-month weekend drills and at their 2-week summer training period. The judge decided a Supreme Court ruling upholding haircut rules for police and full-time military personnel does not apply to reservists. The Groundhog's Day sports and weather after this.
Excuse me, sir.
In sports, locally this evening, the Cornell hockey team hosts Northeastern University in a game scheduled for 8 p.m. at Lina Rink on the Cornell campus. It's the first meeting of the two clubs in 10 years. The Red defeated Northeastern twice back in the 1966-67 season. Lance Nethery still leads the 11-6 Cornell team with 24 goals and 27 assists in the 17 games played thus far. Last night, the Ithaca College basketball team hosted Hobart, and Ithaca won 71-69. Ithaca area weather, today sunny periods and a chance of occasional snow flurries, high about 25. Tonight, increasing cloud cover with a good chance of snow, low 15 to 20. Periods of snow likely tomorrow, the high in the upper 20s. The chance of snow 30% today, 50% tomorrow, or rather tonight, and 70% on Thursday. Right now, it's 23 degrees, that's -5 Celsius, with light snow falling in Ithaca. I'm Keith Olbermann, WVBR News.
Keith, is it really Groundhog Day today?
Yes, it is, February 2nd.
It is. Oh, maybe if we all really pray. I want to see the little nipper come out of the ground.
We'll watch and see if there's anything over the wires on him.
What's the deal with that? If he sees his shadow, he's scared and he goes running back into his stupid little hole?
Well, it has something to do about the weather. I don't know. Something about 6 weeks more bad weather if he doesn't see it. Or I don't know. I don't care, actually.
I used to celebrate Groundhog Day when I was a little kid.
You'd celebrate anything.
That's true. But Groundhog Day was a real special day. I marked it in my calendar, amongst other things. Well, thanks a lot, Keith. We'll see you in about 15 minutes.
At Notre Dame for the first time since 1973, the Knicks dropped their third straight, and Tom Watson still leads at the Crosby. Good evening, everyone. I'm Keith Olbermann, WVBR Sports.
This is WVBR's Sports Weekend, a comprehensive summary of all the day's sports.
10th-ranked UCLA blew a 12-point lead and came back to beat the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame 70-65 at South Bend this afternoon. Forward Marcus Johnson scored a game-high 23 points, and he put the Bruins ahead to stay at 64-63 late in the game. UCLA held a 39-36 halftime edge, and it appeared as if the Bruins had the game out of reach when they outscored the Irish 12-3 in the opening minutes of the second half. However, Notre Dame used a 20-5 burst midway through the period and took a 63-60 advantage with time running out. At that point, Johnson hit from close range, then pushed in the go-ahead field goal. Jim Spillane scored the next 3 points, and Johnson added a field goal to keep the Irish at bay. As mentioned, it was UCLA's first win at South Bend since 1973. In pro basketball, the troubles continue for the Knicks. Pete Maravich scored 38 points, including 11 in the fourth quarter, to lead the New Orleans Jazz to a 111-102 triumph over the Knicks in the Louisiana Superdome today. Maravich took control of the offense when the Jazz held a 78-76 lead with just over 11 minutes left. The NBA's leading scorer hit 3 long jumpers and added 2 assists to ignite a 16-point surge, which gave the Jazz a 94 to, I would guess that's an 84 lead. It has 94-4 here on the UPI copy. I don't know about that. The closest the Knicks could come after that was 107-102 with 41 seconds left. Bob McAdoo led the Knicks with 36 points and 19 rebounds, but it was the third consecutive win for the Jazz after a string of 6 losses, and it was the Knicks' third straight loss, although Stars haven't done them much good. In Boston, the Philadelphia 76ers built an 18-point lead early in the second quarter and hung on to beat the Boston Celtics 91-83 this afternoon. The 76ers were up by a point at 19-18 after the first quarter, but they outscored the Celtics 21-4 at the start of the second period for a 40-22 bulge. The Celtics narrowed the gap to 8 at the half and were within 3 points at 63-60 at the end of 3 quarters. Boston was still within 3 when George McGinnis converted a 3-point play to end the Celtics' chances. Philadelphia had 6 players in double figures, with Julius Erving scoring a team-high 19 points. Also in the NBA today, it was Golden State 104, Atlanta 91, despite 42 points by Atlanta's John Drew, and San Antonio beat Portland 123-118. At the half, it's the New York Nets 45, Chicago 42. In the world of hockey, Bill Riley triggered a 4-goal outburst in the last 3.5 minutes of the final period to rally the Washington Capitals to a 6-3 victory over the St. Louis Blues this afternoon. After Claude LaRose put St. Louis ahead at 3-2, Riley scored his second National Hockey League goal with 3:18 left to draw the Caps even. Then Heartland Monahan beat goalie Doug Grant, and 32 seconds later, Ace Bailey made it 5-3. Jerry Meehan added an empty goal with 25 seconds left for Washington. And in the NHL, one game is still going on after 2 periods at Toronto 2 and Minnesota 0, and in the WHA after 2 periods, New England 3 and Cincinnati 3. At Pebble Beach, California, Tom Watson knocked 2 strokes off par on the front 9 today and has a 2-shot edge over Britain's Tony Jacklin, a little past halfway through the final round of the Bing Crosby National Pro-Am. Watson started today 1 shot ahead of Jacklin, and they finished the first 9 holes the same way. Watson had 2 birdies and no bogeys before the turn, while Jacklin had 3 birdies and 1 bogey. That put Watson at 15 under par after 63 holes. At that point, Lee Elder was 2 back and Vic Regalado 4 strokes off the pace. No one else seemed to have a chance for the $40,000 top prize. Right now, with Watson on the 14th hole, the leaders are Watson at a 16 under par. Jacklin is 14 under, 2 strokes back. Lee Elder, 3 strokes back at minus 13, and Bruce Devlin and Bill Rogers, 6 strokes back at minus 10. In tennis, second-seeded Brian Gottfried upset favored Guillermo Villas of Argentina in straight sets of 6-3, 7-6 this afternoon to win the Baltimore Indoor Tennis Championships. Gottfried won the tiebreaker 8-6 to clinch the $20,000 top prize. Villas was broken by Gottfried in the first game of the second set, but the Argentinian broke in the 6th game to force a 3-3 tie. These tennis terms confuse me. From that point, both players held service through the 12th game to send the second set into the tiebreaker. Trailing 6 points to 5, Gottfried won the last 3 points with some dramatic recovery shots to earn the upset. The rest of the sports scoreboard and a review of local action comes up in a moment. The Tournament of Argentina survived the midsummer heat in Sao Paulo today and won the Brazilian Grand Prix ahead of Formula One champion James Hunt of Britain. The race began in 90-degree temperatures, and at the end, only 7 of 22 cars were still on the track. Niki Lauda, Reutemann's Ferrari teammate and the 1975 driving champion, finished 3rd, while Emerson Fittipaldi was 4th, and Gunnar Nielsen of Sweden was 5th. America's Mario Andretti was plagued with ignition problems, and his Lotus Ford came to a stop on the track near the halfway mark of the race. Hunt led Reutemann through most of the race, but he was forced into the pits for a tire change on the 22nd lap. Hunt returned to the number 5 position and slowly started catching up. He was 4th within a lap and 2nd with 6 laps to go, but he never could catch the front-running Ferrari. There was one minor accident involving Frenchman Patrick Depailler, but doctors at the track infirmary said he was not seriously hurt. Also in auto racing, only 4 of the 198 teams which started the 45th Monte Carlo Auto Rally have dropped out of the race during the first night on the road. The crews, which started from 8 different points throughout Europe, hope to reach a common point in the French Alps early tomorrow morning after 2 nights and 1 day of non-stop driving. Then the field will begin the rally's second stage, consisting of special time trial sections which will take them to Monte Carlo via the most treacherous roads of the French Alps. Though weather conditions have been favorable up until now, organizers say they might have to call off the second special time trial because snow and ice have completely closed one pass through the Alps. Although authorities refused to clear the roads, local residents pulled their shovels from their garages and worked all day yesterday and today trying to make the road passable. Obviously, it's worth some money to them. The first unofficial standings will be given tomorrow night, and rally fans already have their eyes peeled for an Italian driver named Sandro Munari, who is trying for a record equaling a 4th win in the Winter Classic. For the locals over the weekend, it was a very upbeat weekend, specifically the Cornell basketball team, which may have hit a turning point Friday night against Columbia. The Red fought back from a 24-point deficit in the 3rd quarter, and although they lost the game by 2 points, score 76-74, they still exhibited a previously unseen game control and enthusiasm, even when the 2 keys in the comeback, Stan Brown and Jim Atkins, fouled out of the game. The enthusiasm carried into Saturday when the Red played Fordham at Barton Hall and did it again, coming back from an early big deficit to finally win in triple overtime by the score of 74-70. 8 points from the free throw line in the final extra period made the difference. Ben Blewett's team is still only 3-11 on the year, but the season does not look to be the kind of disaster it was developing into as of last week. The Cornell hockey team, coming off the 11-8 slugfest with Clarkson Wednesday night, walked all over Yale yesterday evening at New Haven, winning 7-1. Interestingly enough, Steve Napier, who was pulled out of the Cornell goal Wednesday night because Coach Dick Bertrand thought he was being beaten by a very odious kind of goal, the stuffer as Bertrand calls it, started in goal and was obviously successful against the Elis. Steve made 31 saves and only allowed the 1 goal. 7 different Red players scored goals, and the club really looks to be as improved as both Coach Bertrand and leading scorer Lance Nethery stated this week on WVBR. Ithaca College's basketball team had little trouble with Cortland last night, winning 81-60. Joe Casey had 20 points for the Bombers and Herb Richmond 16, and the bench got a chance to play in what was a surprisingly easy victory for IC. They were expected to have at least some trouble with the Cortland Dragons. The only reason the score was as close as it was the frequent use of the substitutes, or the frequent use of the word was. A couple of other scores from yesterday. In wrestling, Ithaca beat Cortland 42-5, and in JV basketball between the same 2 squads, it was IC by the score of 72-56. RPI swimming beat IC 66-44. Cornell fencing topped Columbia by the score of 19-8. It's difficult and usually foolish to make predictions of any kind, but I will make some predictions on the sports year 1977 after this. Oh boy. As I said, it's difficult and usually foolish to make predictions of any kind, especially for a full year, but then I have never been one to listen to reason anyway, so here goes. First and foremost, at least one professional sports league will disappear during the upcoming year, and my bet is that it will be the World Hockey Association, which will slowly and painfully drop into nothingness, much like the American Basketball Association did last year. That's when the ABA started in the production of As the Leagues Fold. The WHA has been bouncing along since 1972 and has yet to get the kind of national attention any league must get in order to survive. All its name jumpers from the NHL, Bobby Hull, Gordie Howe, and Jerry Cheevers, for instance, are either back in the National Hockey League already or will be heading back next season. The league hasn't had a team in New York City since early 1974 when a monstrosity called the New York Golden Blades packed bags for Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and then San Diego. No pro sports league has managed to survive without a New York club, if you exclude the Canadian Football League, and interestingly, the CFL was at one time considering putting a team in New York. We're already seeing the early parts of the demise of the WHA. The Minnesota Fighting Saints, the second franchise in the league's history to bear that burdensome name, folded last week after selling most of their top stars to Winnipeg and Calgary. Next to go will probably be the Indianapolis Racers, who are playing good hockey, but they're playing it as a hobby. They haven't been paid in several weeks. Number 3 will be the Birmingham Bulls, and it's amazing that pro hockey has lasted as long as 5 months in Birmingham, Alabama, and after that, it's just a matter of time. Sometime during the summer, what is left of the WHA will merge with the NHL. But unlike last year's NBA-ABA merger, this will not be a volume deal. Afforded the opportunity of stepping on some toes without threat of another league's competition, the NHL will realize that its cancerous expansion can yet be corrected, and it will completely revise pro hockey. The NHL will finally pull out of Pittsburgh and probably dump the financially troubled Colorado, Cleveland, and Atlanta clubs. The stronger WHA teams, financially soluble Quebec, Winnipeg, Houston, and possibly Calgary or Edmonton, will be added in their place. Remaining talent will be spread among the 18 teams in a dispersal draft that will immeasurably improve the quality of the hockey played. In the world of boxing, Muhammad Ali will fight at least once more, defend his title against somebody's grandmother, and then retire, possibly more than once. Football will see Joe Namath return to the New York Jets despite his network TV statements to the contrary, but O.J. Simpson may finally get his wish to go to Los Angeles. If O.J. doesn't and is sentenced to Buffalo for a few more years, he will continue to play. Something tells me he realizes his acting abilities are not more than average. The lid is going to come off the stormy cauldron of baseball, and that lid, of course, Commissioner Bowie Kuhn has been sitting on for 8 years. Kuhn will annoy 1 or 2 more owners during the season, and the anti-Kuhn forces will have a majority, finally, and will can the commissioner in a June meeting. On the field, the 2 new American League clubs, Seattle and Toronto, will stink and sink rather quickly. The Yankees and the Red Sox will have a surprising race for the pennant in the American League East, probably due to a critical injury to a Yankee regular such as Thurman Munson. The Indians may be involved in that title chase as well. And if the California Angels can complete a trade for an experienced catcher, they will take the American League West. In the National League, the Reds and Phillies will repeat, but the Phils may have a better shot at Cincinnati this time. As to the World Series, at this point, who knows and who cares? But the most interesting thing in baseball will come next November, when a host of new free agents will seek even fatter contracts for 1978. If the prices get too staggering, look for collusion on the parts of the owners not to sign, that is, blacklist several militant players, and look for those players to sue the sport and win, sending much of organized sports tumbling down to the ground. Then Marvin Miller will become sports commissioner of the world, Howard Cosell will be without anything to comment on, and obviously I've gone a bit off the deep end right about now. That is a good cue to cease forecasting. Let's wait and see what 1977 really has for us. That's Sports Weekend for this Sunday, January the 23rd, 1977. Jim Savitt will be back with more sports tonight on Late Edition at 11. For WVBR Sports, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good night. Also in hockey this evening, the Cornell JV team takes on the Ithaca Stars in what should be a good one at Lida. The 2 teams meet again on Monday night in what is in effect a home-and-home series. The Stars, incidentally, have set up a $59 trip to Montreal for fans interested in following the club at the prestigious Molson tournament 2 weeks hence. The overnight trip will include bus transportation to and from Montreal, accommodations there, tickets to the Stars games, and a bonus, a ticket to the Philadelphia Flyers Montreal Canadiens game at the Mecca of Hockey, the Forum. If you're interested or just want more information, call Gulliver's World. Harvard, incidentally, is coached by former Boston Celtics star Tom Sanders. As a public service, I will now correct an error regarding Mr. Sanders made in one of Ithaca's leading morning papers today. His nickname is Satch, not Snatch. There is a difference, but I will not explore it further. That's tonight's Early Sports. I'm Keith Olbermann. Jeff Jacobson will be back with more sports tonight on Late Edition at 11.
Thanks, Keith. Ithaca area weather winter storm watch tomorrow through Sunday. Snow tonight 2 to 4 inches. New snow possible overnight, low in the teens.
I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Countdown has come to you from the Vin Scully studios at the Olbermann Broadcasting Empire in New York. A lot of people assume that's a conceit. Just call it the Vin Scully studios because he was my friend and one of my heroes. Actually, there are 4 photographs of Vin Scully from 1955 at Ebbets Field in Brooklyn, New York, on the door of this studio. Countdown musical directors Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. Mr. Ray was on the guitars, bass, and drums, produced by TKO Brothers. Other music, including some of the Beethoven compositions, arranged and performed by No Horns Allowed. Sports music, courtesy of ESPN Inc. It was written by Mitch Warren Davis. We call it the Olbermann theme from ESPN2. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by Nancy Faust, the best baseball stadium organist ever. Our announcer today was my friend Dennis Leary, and everything else was pretty much my fault. Or sources close to John Paul Morosi. Sorry. That's Countdown for this, the 1071st day since Dementia J. Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the Insurrection Act against him and them while we still can. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow. Although, if you've heard my voice gradually deteriorate throughout this podcast, maybe not. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow, bulletins as the news warrants and as the throat holds out. Till then, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, good luck, and since today would have been Bob Barker's 100th birthday, help control the pet population, have your pets spayed or neutered. I had the scoop that you had the contract, then I had the story, the plane, and the hours. I wish you had signed with Toronto, dear Shohei, 'cause now my career has been sent to the showers. Where, oh, where are you tonight? How could you leave me here all alone? I searched the world over and I thought I found a Tawny, but you met the Dodgers and he was gone. Thank you, Nancy Faust.